there are two main sort of rationales for my organizing this conference and what we will be discussing. The first reason is generating knowledge on Tibet, particularly the geopolitical context in which Tibet is seen and discussed. Secondly, is about practical engagement and trying to make some kind of practical changes to how Tibet is studied, how Tibet is approached by different actors, and how Tibet is talked about in terms of narratives and frames, and try to effect some change in that regard, because we are coming up against a geopolitical context where the world is changing very rapidly, right? And in some contexts, the world is going up in flames, right? And within that sort of chaos and cacophony, issues like Tibet have always been struggling to stay, seen and relevant, but they will, struggle to have visibility even more, right? So we are trying to come up with strategies, narratives to reconfigure and reframe Tibet for the future.
Dr Jagannath Panda, I am the head of the Stockholm Center for South Asian and Indo-Pacific Affairs at ISDP. Well, I think the India-China-Tibet triangularity is becoming very complex. We have to wait and see how the reincarnation process of His Holiness Dalai Lama is going to take place. But definitely the reincarnation process and the succession process of Dalai Lama is a very complicated issue, which will bring India-China relations into a new, very tense phase in coming times. And I think that will also in a way highlight the future of Dalai Lama and Tibet itself. The future of Dalai Lama, with the new Dalai Lama coming into picture, the 15th Dalai Lama is definitely going to be a debatable issue in India and China, particularly when China is going to declare its own version of Dalai Lama and the Tibetan communities are going to have their own version of Dalai Lama. But we know for a fact that the issue is such a complex, it will bring into a lot of public discussion and debates the institution of Dalai Lama. So whether the institution of Dalai Lama is going to stay relevant after the current Dalai Lama dies, we need to really revisit and we need to really discuss a lot. But the institution of Dalai Lama itself is subject to a lot of discussion and debate, given the fact that with the current Dalai Lama dying, we don't know whether the future Dalai Lama will have the same authority, same charismatic personality to sway the Tibetan people as a unified group in times to come or not. I think the current policy of India towards Tibet is very ambiguous for a definite reasons that we do not really want to have a explicitly open articulated position on matters relating to Tibet. Obviously, there are a large number of Tibetan communities are staying in India. His Holiness is a honored guest, and also the Tibetan government in exile, which is a de facto government of the Tibetan people, and Tibet itself stays in India. So therefore, India does not want to really articulate openly so many things in public domain about Tibet. That itself explains of an ambiguous Tibet policy. But we know for a fact that given the China-India boundary complexity and McMahon line, I think going forward, India has to speak much more openly on the Tibetan issues. Not speaking openly about Tibetan issues at this moment explains that India has a policy position that Tibet is a complicated issue, and probably it is better to not really express the opinions quite openly and to wait for an appropriate time, waiting at a time how China is behaving on a range of complex issues in times to come. So therefore, everything not spoken about Tibet is a spoken position in many ways, is a policy position in many ways that India holds with regard to Tibet. Well, I think the Tibetan communities, of course, expect a lot from India in terms of better livelihood, financial assistance, and in terms of helping them, in terms of gaining a lot of livelihood benefits in India. But again, we know for a fact that India has always supported the Tibetan cause, Tibetan movement in India. It has given shelters, lands, and offices, and also financial aid to the Tibetan communities. So his Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, has acknowledged it publicly, thanking India. But I think the time has come, we need to really move to the next phase of India-Tibet relations. And I think in that context, probably the succession process, the reincarnation process of His Holiness is going to matter a lot to India. And India will be quite vigilant about each and every movement that China is going to take with regard to Tibet. Of course, we know that there is a militarization process, infrastructure development, and there is a rapid Sinicization process is taking place in Tibet, which is not in India's interest. So therefore, I think the Tibetan communities needs to really work closely with India and Indian government, and we need to wait for how this entire episode is going to evolve. But I think this is a very dynamic period for India and for the Indian government currently. Thank you.
So my name is Kartia Buffetrille. I'm a French anthropologist, and I work a lot of Tibetan-Chinese relationship, but also a lot on what we call popular ritual and pilgrimages around sacred mountains, but also new rituals like vegetarianism or also immolation. I did a lot of job on immolation. I wanted to make a short presentation of the situation we cross right now in Guimet Museum, which is the biggest Asiatic museum in Europe, and following the commemoration of the establishment of 60 years of relationship between China and France, we discovered that the museum not only changed the name of the exhibition rooms from Tibet, Nepal to Himalayan world, but also during one of the exhibitions, which was sponsored by China, we discovered that Tibet disappeared for the Chinese term tubo, which is used only by Chinese writer. So I think it's different. In France, I mean, Nepal and Bhutan, as we know, are very small countries, and they are blocked between two enormous countries, which are China and India. But in the case of France, I will say that it's even more shocking, because the main reason for me is for money. And the idea that it's a state museum, not only they accept the money from sponsors from China, among them one Pansio, who is a heavyweight person from the United Front, which is the organ of influence of the Communist Party. So in the State Museum, you see money from the Communist Party, which is for me a scandal. And at that time, as you know, it's obvious to understand to everyone except for the president of the museum, you have to give something, and in that case, it's to rewrite the history and to take the Chinese narrative and to put him in the museum, which is really, I mean, it's a scandal how a museum, which job is to educate the people, will do what they do in China, in a totalitarian state. So I think that, as I told you before, if you say to anyone, Tibet, as soon you have images coming, and images which are Dalai Lama, beautiful mountain, whatever, Buddhism, but if you say Shizong, you totally erase at that time Tibet, his people, civilization, and this, no, it's not acceptable. We can't in a democracy accept that. Long ago.
Can you connect these things together?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was, you are right. I never think about that because I forgot the book. It was, my God, 2000, I think, 25 years old. Yes, I mean, it's the same things in the sense that with the 100 question, China wanted to impose his narrative about, so they took 100 questions and they gave their answer. This is why, with Anne-Marie Blondeau, we took the book and we took the 100 questions. We gave a summary of the Chinese answer, and then we gave, through a lot of specialists, according to the question, we gave the academic answer. And it was the same because we wanted the true narrative being published and not the Chinese one.
So how can we challenge these things?
I think we have to be very, very, how do you say that in English? Let's say cautious. We have really to look, and because Musée du Quai Branly had written Shizong. And, well, we won, but it was easy in the sense that the Musée du Quai Branly is a museum dedicated more to Oceania. So, I think they were thinking, we will not have Tibetan every Sunday fighting and open letters and all that for 10 Tibetan artifacts. So I think, I don't know, but I think this is the reason why. Gibe is another question because it's really a lot. And the president is really dishonest because she says, we put Himalayan world because when we don't know where the object comes from, but when you see something written like a piece of Densatile, Himalayan world, everyone in this room can say where Densatile is. And also if you have Tanka from Jacques Bacot, we all know that Jacques Bacot was in the east of Tibet and not in Ngari or something like that. So to say that you don't know where the Tanka come from is really problematic. So they are really not honest, and they try to impose because they receive money. We have all the exhibition which make, you had a lot of people, and I tried to show that by this way, his strategy was working because the journalists, most of them, I even don't know if they went to see the exhibition, but they use all the propaganda, the catalog, the things that Guimet sent. Only 4 journalists really did something. And one of them I didn't give the detail, but it was very good. It's a journalist an economic journalist in Switzerland, and he said that the exhibition was awful, the decoration awful, and the object, you didn't need to have Chinese coming because in another Chinese museum we have as much object. And he finished telling, and it seemed that Madame Linz, the president, I don't know how you say this in French, we say, she put down her trouser, to say that she lied in front of the Chinese. And he said, she put down her trouser and it was not nice. So it's only 4 articles on 17. And so it works. So if I must say that thanks to the media were a big help, but we still have really to take care because, as you know, since 2023, it's the policy to impose abroad this term. It works with Xinjiang. It's no more Oriental Turkestan. So we have, just a small example. I worked a long time in Gyaltsen, and Gyaltsen is called Shangri-La now since 2001. And I went there many times since 2003. In some years, Gyaltsen totally disappeared. I think I'm the only one when I go to Gyaltsen to say Gyaltsen. And even the Tibetan, they say Shangri-La. You go to a train station, you go to a bus station. If you say I want a ticket to Gyaltsen, you will never get. So in some years, Gyaltsen disappeared. So for me, it was a good lesson. We have really to be careful, to be cautious, and as soon as we see, to write or to do something. To sorry, because in my fight,
how difficult the situation is that we Tibetans face, and how daunting the challenges are for the Tibetans. And at the same time, if you look at the situation or position of the Indian government, the Nepalese government, and the American also, through these descriptions, it becomes also clearer that how fragile and vulnerable the support that we Tibetans have are, depending on the shifting political situation. At the same time, I feel encouraged and inspired because, most of you, when we speak about this, the problems that we Tibetans are facing, for example, you both now just said, we should do this, we need to do this. You don't say, you Tibetans have to do. So you say, you, and that's exactly what we need in our situation. This over the last 70 years, one of the most brutal and powerful regime has been trying to erase the question of Tibet once and for all, And sometimes I think, in 1950, when the People's Liberation March into Tibet, I think at that time, Mao Zedong and all the leaders of China, I'm sure they might have thought, in 10, 15 years, nobody will speak about Tibet. Then 59 happened, And when His Holiness escaped to India, again I'm sure, the Chinese leadership may have thought 15, 20 years, this issue will be, gone. Now in 2025, we are still here. And a lot of discussions such as this one is taking place in many places, So therefore, there is some real strength in this cause. Now each has a different interpretation what this strength is. But what is clear is there is something, some strength. So from that, I think I get a lot of inspiration. And then also, I tell my fellow Tibetans also, in my own lifetime, I have seen so many groundbreaking political changes, which everybody thought impossible until it happened, Why not in our case? Why? And yesterday I tried to show how I see the bigger picture, If you look at China, there are hopes, that things will change. If you look at the wider global political landscape, I think the perception of China in the international community has changed dramatically, in the last 10 years. So therefore, there's no reason to lose hope.